This is.
I would happily watch it again. It's the greatest trailer I've ever seen.
It's the best trailer I've ever seen, and it's based on the life of, quote, the Israeli Walt Disney.
This is filmed like a Zales commercial. Like, this is supposed to be taking place in the Holocaust, and it looks like a fucking Zales commercial. We extracted the gold for this wedding band from a Jew's teeth. This is how we got it.
Name? Joseph Paul.
Why are you here?
You're a new map maker, Commandant.
Then you could be of service. Unfortunate. For you.
Is it possible to change my seat?
How does this work?
I'm waiting for this.
So,
sunshine.
like, he went to, like, Auschwitz, and they're like, we heard you're really good at making maps.
Yeah.
How did that conversation start?
But then he has a meet cute at the death camp.
It's
you all know what it's like when you meet a corked up shouty
Okay,
at the concentration camp.
no one looked like this in 1939. This is like a woman that only exists, like, on Hinge.
But who takes care of you?
Okay, they didn't have Rachel Patton in the Holocaust. They weren't listening to that.
Rebecca Tenenbaum.
That's a jet plane. They didn't have there were like 4 jet planes in the world, and like 2 of them were operational. Sorry. Okay, yeah, so they're gonna fuck each other raw at Auschwitz. There's tons of that going on. Oh my god, no condom for me. No thanks. I'm the Israeli Walt Disney. I don't need a condom at Auschwitz. I'll just fucking raw dog you 3 feet from the gas chamber.
Things that they can't take from us. Laughter, joy, our spirits.
There was laughter and joy as well. I call this movie the zone of laughter, or life is freaking beautiful.
I think you're a crazy person.
They went through the entire Holocaust. They like gained 5 pounds during the Holocaust. Are they sure? Are they sure they were in the Holocaust? They're like, yeah, it was really bad. We went to this like camp where it was like men and women. It was like multiracial actually, and none of us got killed. And most of the time, we were just making scrapbooks and having unprotected sex.
Maybe they were in a reenactment troupe, and they thought they were in the real thing or something. It's like a delusion.
Like, I can't wait to see this movie. It's a novel take.
That was the trailer for Bow, Artist at War, which was singularly the most jaw-dropping movie trailer I have ever seen. I sent this to Seamus, a friend of the show, Seamus, and he said that, like, this is the most fake movie making fun of a stupid movie in another movie, but it actually exists trailer that has ever been produced. And when I was watching this, I was like, surely this is the most offensive depiction of the Holocaust ever put to film. But then, no, I found out it's based on the life of the Israeli Walt Disney. So then I was like, oh, well, that makes sense, including getting laid in Auschwitz. Yeah, hey, babe, so, let's fuck like there's no tomorrow.
To quote A-Up Lovely, no need for condom.
So I should probably let's officially start the show, and I'll start the show by saying, well, it's Monday, September 9th, and
there you go again.
At it again. There we go again. We're back on the show, joined by our good friends Derek and Danny of the American Prestige podcast. And well, we're talking about the movie Reagan today. Before we get into Reagan, I was fascinated because many spies told me that you got to go early to the Reagan movie to see the trailers before it. And many people were encouraging me to go early to catch a trailer for a new documentary about how Lincoln was gay. And I was really hoping to see that. But what I got instead was a million times more insane. The sort of this treacly romantic comedy about a death camp and a cartoonist who met a corked up shouty in the gas chambers and learned to live, laugh, love in the middle of the Holocaust.
Yeah, they really don't seem like they're having that bad of a time in the Holocaust. Like, it really seems like okay. Is it like a pro or anti-Holocaust movie? We really like don't know.
Well, okay, so before I saw Reagan, there was a trailer for a new Matt Walsh documentary called like "Am I Racist" or something, and I gotta say he's really washed. He needs a new bit. He seemed catatonic. He seemed like on ketamine in the trailer. It's like, this is your trailer for your movie. Could you get a little excited? But I was hoping to see the Lincoln is Gay documentary, and this is a trailer for a movie called Lincoln, Lover of Men.
The title isn't bad. Lincoln, Lover of Men. Okay,
I have to get a little conspiracy brained about this because I did watch the complete trailer for Lincoln, Lover of Men. And all the talking heads in the movie are very like, they're clearly like gender and queer studies professors at various American universities. And they're like, sexuality didn't exist on such a neat binary in the 19th century. And yeah, like he often slept in the same bed with other men, which, by the way, I've looked like, this is the sum total of the case for Lincoln being gay, is that he often slept in the same bed with other men. But like, he was a traveling lawyer on a circuit.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was like one bed in the state of Illinois, and like him and 6 other guys had to sleep in it. That's the sum total. But so it's clear from the trailer that like on first glance, it seems to be like, this is a documentary about social progress, and if we can embrace one of America's greatest presidents as having been a gay man, then certainly we'll accept all sorts of queerness in the present day. I think that this is all a feint, and the fact that it was played before the Reagan movie and literally nowhere else, I would hazard a guess.
What is the audience? Yeah,
yeah, it's reactionary.
I would hazard a guess that if you looked into the funding and makers of this movie, that this is a covert attempt to just make Lincoln equals Lincoln gay in the Lincoln gay in the public imagination, to just be like, because the right wing are trying to kind of like rewrite the history of World War II to be like, actually maybe we're on the wrong side. And like, it's just, if the decent civilized men who can argue about history can come to this cold, rational conclusion that the Holocaust happened by accident. But so I think they're trying to do this with the Civil War now too, to just be like, they can't outright say it was good to start a war to keep human beings as slaves, but what they can say is like, yeah, the guy who won the Civil War,
gay.
He was gay. He was gay.
I like the fact that you can look at that title and think, oh, Lincoln, Lover of Men, like he emancipated the slaves. He was a great man.
Who isn't?
Humanity. And then you get to the thing and it's like, no, we're saying he fucked men. That's where we're at. It's
was he a top or a bottom though? You have to find the document.
Well, in the 19th century, these things were very fluid. So
you're right. Everyone was Vers and Switch back then. All right. So, like I said, we should officially start the show. We're talking about the new Ronald Reagan movie starring Dennis Quaid, and from the director of probably 8 different Casper the Friendly Ghost live action movies, Soul Surfer, and 3 Ninjas Escape from Witch Mountain or something like that. But we're joined by, of course, our good friends Derek Davison and Danny Besner from the American Prestige podcast. Who better to take us through this? This rapturous and intense.
Glorious.
I mean, look, I think the way I describe this movie is to quote another American president, Woodrow Wilson, upon seeing the film D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, he said it was like history written in lightning. I would say this movie is like history that's gotten damp and kind of moldy from like a leaky faucet under your sink and is causing black mold in your apartment.
So I have to...
the greatest fucking hits.
I have to say this. I had this incredibly disturbing thought. I got to the theater. I got there early because Will had told me about the trailer for Bao, the cartoonist, and I had to see if I got the same trailer. So I got there early, and it was like Sunday night. There were only like 8 people who wound up showing up for this entire screening. And I was there early, so I was the only person in this theater. And I started to think like, wow, what if I'm the only person who comes to see this movie? Like what could you get away with being the only person in the movie theater? So I'm sure you guys saw this. There was a story a while ago about a guy who got arrested in Detroit for jacking off in the middle of Love Lies Bleeding.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
So I had
was it Challengers or Love Lies Bleeding?
It was Love Lies Bleeding. I had this depraved vision of like a headline like Brett Stevens gets arrested for jacking off in Reagan. or like Benny Johnson or somebody just like getting hauled out for like they couldn't help
funded
themselves.
by the Russian government.
Reagan's on
Fred
there.
Willard, Pee Wee
jerking
Herman
off.
style, yeah.
And that was that.
Fred
set me up
Willard did
for
it too?
for a great experience.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. No. I was going to say it was a emotional whiplash because in the morning I watched Reagan and then I watched The Godfather actually with friend of the pod Josh Olson later in the night, and it was interesting just in terms of filmmaking how shitty Reagan was. There are so many scenes that don't advance either plot or character that are just reciting the Reagan greatest hits. I hope you're all Republican when he was shot. And, when he says the "sh" to the protesters. And it was just interesting as a film because it wasn't as incompetent as the Hunter Biden movie. So it was like a competently made, almost well acted at times, I thought, piece of shit. And it was a really interesting moment in the history of Hollywood.
I found it to be one of the most baffling movies that I've ever seen. Incompetently made in many ways, obviously, but that is sort of like par for the course for this type of movie. Like we'll call it the broadly Christian genre of movie. I'm very used to that at this point. After like The Reliant, God's Not Dead, et cetera, it was more so that like the pacing and tone of it was dreamlike in this way that makes me think that many scenes were procedurally generated. We'll get to it, but there's a scene on the canoe that gave me the feeling of like not taking ketamine, but almost being dosed with it against my will. Then there is the fact of the central characters of the movie. John Voight plays probably the most confusing character I've ever seen. He is ostensibly a KGB agent, but his job with the KGB has been to glaze Reagan for 50 years.
Like going back to when he was a lifeguard, he's been following this kid around.
This man is 98 years old, and he has spent his entire life like watching Reagan get changed as a teenager, as a lifeguard. He watched Reagan on his first wedding night and was like, oh my God, this is the first instance of back shots.
What does he call him?
I wish I was Jane.
The Crusader, right?
He calls
him the Crusader. That's what he calls him. Yeah, he calls him the Crusader.
And it's like, do you do anything at the KGB except for like glaze Ronald Reagan?
And the whole Politburo watching him on TV, that's the only time they meet is to get together and watch the TV and watch like Governor Reagan give a speech to the California Assembly.
It's like,
it was baffling framing device.
It's like, no wonder you guys fucking lost. Your head guy spent his entire career like setting up like underskirt cameras for Ronald Reagan.
I mean, like he would have been liquidated long ago if he gets like the upper echelons of the KGB together for a meeting, and he's like, guys, I have to show you film. Newt Rockney, All American. This man will destroy us. He's watching all the bedtime for Bonzo movies, and they're like, "What, Conrad? What are you doing?
What are you talking about?
Do you work here? What's your job again?" And he's like, as soon as the Soviet Union collapses, he's like, "I will finally have access to American VHS library to see all of Ronald Reagan films."
Randy! Where's the rest of me?
Yeah. They're like, well, like, what did you learn? And he's like, Ronald Reagan's penis is 8 inches, 5.7 in diameter. It is rare for an Irishman to have this much of a tip, but the Crusader is a special man.
The choice to have the framing device be like John Voight doing the worst Russian accent ever, narrating this movie, talking to Vladimir Putin Jr., like the heir apparent.
It made no
to
fucking
the
sense. Yeah.
Who gets this? My favorite thing was like, this guy gets increasingly frantic over the course of the movie as he's learning about Ronald Reagan. Like by 2/3 of the way through the movie, he's like ready to jump out a fucking window in this guy's apartment, but he's like pulling his hair out.
Smoking
like, oh my God, there can't be anybody like this. What are you talking about? He's like so fucking upset by the notion that Ronald Reagan existed. Like, what is
baffling
going on here?
Yeah.
Like, what are these people doing?
Super weird.
I want to speak to this framing device that we're all alluding to because it speaks to like the essential problem with this movie and the entire genre of movies that it stands in for. And it's okay, like, so the movie is like, the old adage is show, don't tell. This movie is entirely told to you by a senile John Voight. I almost said James Woods, but a senile John Voight caping in a bizarre Russian accent, playing the role of like a longtime KGB analyst who's been tasked with schooling Vladimir Putin Jr. or his heir apparent on where it all went wrong for the Soviet Union. And like his lesson is not like anything to do with geopolitics or Russian Cold War strategy. It has to do entirely with the life and career of Ronald Wilson Reagan. And the lesson learned is that Ronald Reagan was the greatest guy ever who did all the right things, never made a bad choice, and essentially was good and decent and honest in all things and was too good for the Soviet Union. And what I mean here is that, like, even in a hagiographic movie, there has to be some tension, consequences,
like something,
and conflict. So this movie is like a Wikipedia entry being read to you by a senile man in a Russian accent, where like every scene is introduced by John Voight telling this guy, being like, and then he went on to do another good thing that was right and correct.
Well, it's sort of an extension of something that we have been noticing in conservative media. We noticed it in Mr. Burcham. We've noticed it in a lot of like very contemporary things. Basically, everything that they have made since like the general right-wing cultural backlash that has made them feel ascendant. And that is, they have taken the forms of the people they feel they have defeated, in that they are imitating the worst liberal art because they are making media that has no friction in it. There's no friction or conflict or character or anything. It's just, look how great this guy is.
And there's no vitality, Felix. I want to disagree with that 100%. There's nothing vital about any of the art, whether it's Burcham or this or the Hunter Biden movie or any of those shitty Christian movies. Kevin Sorbo, of course, shows up in this. And are they, Will, do you know, are they funded by the same group?
Well, the director of this movie directed the sequel to God's Not Dead, God's Still Here, or something like that. Yeah.
Classic. But there's no vitality to any. I think that's really smart because it's a washed philosophy almost. So one of the things that was also really funny is how old all of the characters were. Like Gorbachev in real life was something like 40 when he assumed the premiership. He's like 75 in this, and every fucking actor is so fucking old. And that the AI de-aging, I think, really, really comes through. Like John Voight just looks fucking insane when he has like the chin strap beard. He looks like Travis Kelce kind of.
He does. He looks like he's wearing football pads. I mean, he looks like he's wearing fucking shoulder pads.
Very weird.
Like, bulked up like this. It's so fucking weird.
There's an uncanny lack of vitality to the whole project that is really correct. That's really interesting. I agree.
Yeah.
I shout out to Janie Danger who hit me to the Lincoln is Gay trailer, but in her Letterboxd review of this movie said that John Voight's character's job was to sit in the official KGB cuck chair and just watch footage of Ronald Reagan owning them over and over again and be like, my God, how does he keep doing it? He is too perfect. And like the tension,
Jane hates him.
Yeah, the tension
Jen
and conflict in this movie.
He's so good at fucking her.
The tension and conflict in this movie is supposed to be about how Ronald Reagan won the Cold War and like liberated the planet from the yoke of authoritarian Soviet communism. But like, and the opening credits is just like a newsreel of like the world turning red, and like the last thing it says directed by Sean McNamara, and it's a mushroom cloud. So those are the stakes. But then it's immediately done away with because they're like, well, all that's over and America won. Here's how they did it. And it's like, oh, all right, okay. I guess I can another 2 hours of this movie now. All right, I guess we'll check out.
And also, just in terms of the movie, one, the Cold War ended under HW. It didn't end under Reagan, and the Soviet Union collapsed under HW. But then also, they don't. It's so weird. They spend so much of the movie on the diplomacy between Reagan and Gorbachev, but then they don't talk about the last diplomatic things that they actually did, which arguably did set the stage.
Complete absence from this movie.
Very weird.
Very telling.
That was the first thing. That was like the first thing I noted about this. That HW is not in this at all. There's literally not a second.
There's one scene.
There's like one brief scene where he turns up in a meeting.
And he looks fucking nothing like him at all. Yeah. It looks so weird.
Then okay, yeah. I must have missed that. But like they talk about Iran-Contra, and it's like there's barely. I guess there's one scene that I missed because it looks nothing like him. And it's like, again, to take over the script doctor Will Menaker role here, my script doctor Felix Biederman idea here was HW should have had a prominent role, and he should have been played exactly like Cameron in Paid in Full. Like he should like Reagan is obviously Wood Harris because he's boring, but he's an honest guy. But Reagan is telling like Jane and everyone these boring ass like stories about like ancient Egyptian economics and all this bullshit. He's reading all these Birchright pamphlets. HW is killing people. He's fucking all his secretaries. He's selling blow. After Reagan gets shot, HW comes in and he's like, "You're tough, right? Yo, Phoenix gets shot every day, B." during the Iran-Contra scene, they had like the Democrats have him. They have him like in the interrogation room, and he's like, "I'm not stitching on anyone from Connecticut. When I come home."
Yeah, he's like Reagan wakes up in his hospital bed, and he's just like HW is there noisily eating Funyuns, just being like, pull your skirt up, man. People get shot every day.
Yo, hey man, pull your skirt down, B. Streets is missing you, yo.
Yeah. You tough, right?
You're tough. You tough, right? Yeah, no, I mean, like, I'm one of those people that, like, of course, okay, I need to talk about my movie theater experience because it was the opposite of sea of heads. It was nary a head in the audience. There were about 4 people other than me in the audience. 3 of them left with about 20 minutes left in the movie, and I was so jealous of them. I was so jealous. And then the last person remaining in the theater was this old woman. I had to turn around and look. She started clapping at the end. She clapped for Ronald Reagan.
Hell yeah.
Someone at mine clapped too.
I guess like the thing about this movie, my comment on this movie is that it animated American history with all the vivid intensity of the reenactments on Forensic Files. Like that's really because like scenes are just introduced by John Voight being like, here is when Ronald Reagan did this thing. And then they just show him doing that thing. And there's like, it's the definition of telling, not showing. But here's the thing. Even in a movie, which is like I said, is bereft of any drama, conflict, tension, character, or interest, because it essentially is like, here's a record of a guy doing exactly the correct thing at every given moment. But even in a movie as hagiographic as this, I think it's worth noting that Ronald Reagan, as a character, such that he has one at all, comes across as entirely a fanatic and a dope. A guy who believed anything anyone told him about the Soviet Union and who is essentially a witless buffoon in every other aspect of his life.
Yeah, the scene where he meets Nancy is horrifying. Basically, like Reagan, for like his first marriage to Jane is a bitch, right?
Horrible.
Like Reagan, like
she's horrible.
Yeah, like Reagan, there'll be a dinner and Reagan will be like, I just read a pamphlet today that, a lot of Jews are born with horns. And she's like, can you stop telling the truth, you retard? You're making it hard to be an actor by saying things that are brave and true. I would leave you if you weren't so good at fucking me. And then John Voight pops up from underneath the table. She's right.
The Crusader was good at fucking.
Yeah. And so like, that marriage is clearly like on the rocks. But then Nancy, when Reagan is like, he's being the greatest snitch of all time, when he's doing the Nicky Barnes of Hollywood and snitching on everyone, and he's running like the snitch office, she comes in and she's like, yeah, I have like the same name as someone who's on your communist list, but I'm like not them. And it's like, it's going to like ruin my family's life. Can you like take me off of it? And Reagan's like, well, you can change your name. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Change your name? But then he uses the threat of her being blacklisted as a communist to like go out to dinner with her. And this is when I thought that the subtitle of the movie should be called Reagan, the Irish Weinstein.
No, because it's played like such a charming meet cute between him and Nancy Davis, the future Miss Nancy Reagan. And you're right, though, when Nancy Reagan, played by Penelope Ann Miller, who you may remember from such films as Carlito's Way and The Relic. So, like, she comes in and essentially he's like, "Oh, it'd be a shame if your name stayed on this blacklist that will ruin your life and career. Well, why don't you just go out to dinner with me instead?" He's like, "Oh, why certainly."
It's so weird, and there's never any indication of like why she might be attracted to him other than that he's Ronald Reagan, and like, oh my God, Ronald Reagan is asking me out on a date. This is, amazing.
And they have zero charisma. They have zero
Oh, man.
on-screen
Like, no, yeah, there's no
connection. It's
chemistry.
really fucking grim. Mina Suvari was probably the best.
They are adrift in a
actress.
canoe, which we will get to eventually. But I guess
From the
should
standpoint
begin with
of like the baffling kind of choices that get made in this movie, just aesthetically. I do you guys remember the scene where he goes to Vegas because his career's falling apart and he just becomes like this stage
Pabst
guy
Blue
in
Ribbon,
Vegas to kind of Pabst
spokesperson,
Blue
yeah.
Ribbon. Yeah, there's like this. There are a few of these throughout the movie, but there's like this brief montage of, I guess it's supposed to be like real footage, like almost like a quick fire documentary stuff. But interspersed with that, it seemed like there was stuff that they filmed for the movie, but they filmed it so that to look like it was real footage of like people playing slots or whatever in like Vegas.
Yeah, JFK style.
It was just so bizarre aesthetically, and that was the first point where I was like, if I just left and tried to skate on what I know of Ronald Reagan, would anybody notice? Like, if I just walked out of this,
Derek.
Skated on the movie.
Derek, I'm one of those people that I had to check the runtime of the movie before going into it. I was like, oh Christ, this is my Sunday. Just flush down the fucking toilet. And I'm one of those people that, like, in my brain, when I see 135 minutes, I go, oh, it's an hour and 35 minutes. And then I'm just sitting in the theater and I'm like, wait a second, 135. No, wait, this is over 2 hours long. Fuck.
I was happy because I don't like to check my phone or anything during the movie. I hate that. But there were so few people in the theater that I was able to like put my phone in the seat next to me and just like, without disturbing anybody, like to keep tabs on the time. I'll be, okay, 20 minutes left. I can make this. I can do this. I did that the only thing
that kept my focus on the movie itself was the fact that the Giants game was actually worse than this movie. It would have done more psychic damage to me than just gritting it out and seeing Dennis Quaid flash his $1 million smile for the 10,000th time.
I want to thank the actual KGB, the actual Russians in real life, for running piracy sites and enabling me to watch a very good copy of this. It was like a last ditch effort. I was looking at all the websites that like Mind of Jason looks at to find movies like Money Heist and like Bank Crime. And I even like, I was trying to find torrents. There were only cams up, but like in the last second, I did find a Eastern European site that had a very good copy, but I was prepared because I knew how long this movie was. I was like, well, I guess like no one's going to be seeing it. So I could take my Steam Deck to the theater if I'm really bored, but like, thank God it did not come to that.
I think we should go through the movie, just chronologically go through the movie. But like, it should be stressed though that like, in addition to being dog shit boring, this movie looks incredibly chintzy and cheap, sloppily made, just half-assed in every regard. I would say this movie has no less than 700 like stock footage inserts of like aerial shots of DC, London, or Moscow to like just stand in for the fact that like, oh, we're in a new place now, establishing shot that we bought from Getty Images.
A lot of the backgrounds are also out of focus, right? Particularly in the first hour of the movie, there were 3 or 4 scenes when the background was just totally out of focus. It was very strange, particularly when Kevin Dillon playing Jack Warner in an Oscar-winning turn was yelling at him. The background is so out of focus. It just seemed like a total mistake.
So the movie opens with, I mean, like here's one of the cruelest things about this movie is that it opens by depicting how close we came to being spared from this movie and Ronald Reagan's presidency.
Yeah, they really start on a downer for sure.
Yeah,
hot John Hinckley.
Like, he's walking out of the hotel in DC, and then there's John Hinckley, and blah blah blah, and then it's like record scratch. You're probably wondering how I got here, except instead of that, it's John Voight being like, "I will tell you a story now of greatest American president who defeated Soviet Union." But for the most part, like, the movie keeps cutting back to James Woods in this apartment, just like doddering around telling this story. But like it picks up with like it covers Ronald Reagan's career the movie really begins following Ronald Reagan when he is an actor in Hollywood in the 40s. And like his entree into politics and what got him on the KGB's radar is that he was the vice president of the Screen Actors Guild at a time in Hollywood where a lot of the trade unions were communist influenced, or there were many communists in the trade unions, and there was like a radical labor movement in Hollywood that was seeking to counter the power of both the mob and the big studios in film production. And Ronald Reagan was an FBI informant throughout all of this, and like in John Voight's character's telling, they were like, we were so close to taking over Hollywood, except for this one man stopped us, and his name was Ronald Reagan.
And again, like the framing here, at one point he's like showing Vladimir Putin Jr. a film, like on a reel-to-reel film strip, basically, of Reagan's life. And it's during that they have flashbacks back from his days as the FBI informant to his childhood, to his time as a lifeguard, as a teenager, implying that John Voight was filming this guy from like the time he was 8 years old up. They had a KGB agent assigned to take video to take film
to this random lifeguard,
just this random guy who's going to someday change the world. It's batshit.
John Voight's character would have to be like 170 years old. Because he's presumably been like documenting the Reagans since like his grandparents. Like if he was able to spot like, oh my God, this lifeguard is so sexy and brave, he's probably going to defeat us. He had to have had an eye on his parents and his parents before that. You didn't just randomly, zero in on this lifeguard.
He was the KGB Bene Gesserit. He was like, our plans are measured in thousands of years.
Yeah. I don't think any character in any movie I've ever seen has glazed another character that they never encounter physically hard. It has to. It's like I'm struggling to think of a comparison, and there is none.
Maybe like Rear Window at best. Will, I had a question actually. Do you know in that scene where he's in Hollywood and he's yelling at Eddie Cantor, who is the gay Jewish communist?
Dalton Trumbo.
Spent the night teaching guitar online and then watched Trumbo for like the billionth time.
Dalton Trumbo, that's who it is. Okay,
There's a scene
that's a great scene.
He's having dinner with Eddie Cantor and Dalton Trumbo.
Yes, okay. And he's like, you idiot communist Jews.
And they're all political. And there's a scene where the Dalton Trumbo character, the blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, looks at Reagan and he's like, a day is coming, Ronald. A day is coming when you'll be asked to choose sides. And on that day, I will kill you. I will literally murder you. And then Ronald Reagan gets up and he's like, well, I don't know about that. I'm just not really a fan of politics. I just like making movies so much. And then just like walks away. But then like Dalton Trumbo's like, Ronald Reagan, I'm going to kill him.
That is a recurring theme in this movie. If there are any themes that could be identified, it's that like Reagan's only fault, and the only fault in his character, this is a real like, my only weakness, I work too hard type thing, is that he thought too highly of his enemies. He saw the good in everyone too much. And if he had any fault, it was that. It would be subtext, but Nancy literally says this out loud several times.
You're too good a man. And they also, of course, just skip over totally the biggest thing he did for the first half of his life, which was getting residuals for actors. Like they skip from like the 50s to 1962. Reagan was actually really instrumental in the 1960 SAG WGA strike. And I found it odd that they spent so much time on labor unions. And then this was like a gigantic deal, and it catapulted him to the governorship partially because people thought that he could be molded. But I guess it's obvious there's no way they could do anything slightly pro-labor.
There was an interesting sleight of hand in the movie where like his political career is sort of like launched, or the germ is planted by Jack Warner, portrayed by Entourage's and Platoon's Kevin Dillon. But he's like, hey, like, like the war is over. He was like, he said, you gave this war like 5 years of your life. And like, your career is going nowhere. Like it seemed to imply that Ronald Reagan fought in World War II. and like no, he was just in newsreels portraying a soldier trying to get you to buy war bonds. He did not. I know in his second term in the White House, he literally said, "I liberated a concentration camp," because a character he portrayed in a movie did so. But he did not actually. He was not actually in. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think he was actually in.
That was great because Kevin Dillon at one point is like,
did, as a matter of fact.
Kevin Dillon at one point is like, this war has taken the best years of your like he was fucking Ted Williams. Like, this war has taken the best years of your life from you.
Like, he would have won the MVP. He would have won Best Actor if he wasn't fighting and storming the beaches of Normandy.
It is such a Johnny drama thing to think too. Like, he sees Ronald Reagan playing a soldier in like a U.S. Army propaganda film, and he's like, "Baby, bro, you were basically there."
I am Dachau. Speaking of another veteran of World War II, on the way to the theater, I've been listening to Gore Vidal's memoir, Point to Point Navigation, which he reads himself on the audiobook. And it's a real treat. And I have to do Chapo Department of Corrections. Gore Vidal is not buried in Arlington Cemetery, but in fact in Rock Creek Park, the other big cemetery in D.C. So I'll be docking my pay for that egregious oversight on my behalf. But going into the theater, and in like the first 5 minutes of the movie, like seeing Dennis Quaid do his Ronnie impression and grin and yuck it up. The first 5 minutes of the movie, I was like, man, I really wish Gore Vidal was alive to see this movie. I know he'd get a big chuckle out of it, as he was such a fan of Ronald Reagan and his film and political career. Then, like 10 minutes into the movie, I was like, nope, it's better that he's dead. And in fact, I wish he was as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we see his fraught relationship with his first wife, portrayed by Jane, portrayed by Mina Suvari, who, Felix, as you already said, she was like, "Stop taking brave political stands and just be an actor, stupid." And then, because her career took off, and he was, babysitting Bonzo and the kids, and then, John Voight's character is like, despite his magnificent talent as an actor, his career stalled out because his wife is a bitch.
Is she a Republican in real life, Mina Suvari? Is everyone involved in this Republican?
I assume you would have to be, although I guess the money spends either way.
Gambling debts,
Yeah. I always, whenever someone is in a movie like this, I always imagine that they accidentally ran over like an Adelson grandchild. Like that they were
fealty to them.
Yeah, they were leaving like the Chateau Marmont. They were fucked up, and they were like, "Oh my god, there's a little yarmulke flying in the air. What can I do?" And then a year later, they've wasted a year of their life being in Reagan.
I don't think I really appreciate about the movie is like the flashbacks to his early life. Like there's a couple of great Reagan moments here that sort of humanize him and just show you the type of character and the type of man he really was. And there's a couple really funny ones, like when he was on he was on a football team and they couldn't travel because it was Southern California and some of their players were black. So he puts up the black players in his parents' house when they're at a road game or something like that. But the movie does lean very heavily on his, I shall say, career as a lifeguard when he was 16. And the movie posits this as some sort of Rosetta Stone for understanding the man, is that he just wanted to save lives. And he viewed himself as a guardian of life. And he just didn't want America or liberty to drown after drinking too much.
But also that he had foresight. Remember the whole thing with the currents that he knew when the currents were going under the thing, and he knew what the Soviets were going to do before they did because of his lifeguard ability. It was fucking so stupid. But that's what John Voight says at some point.
And just to my earlier point that the movie cannot help but portray this man as a fanatic and a dope, especially on all things related to communism. Is one of my favorite scenes is a early formative moment for Reagan is when at his local church, the pastor, played by Kevin Sorbo of God's Not Dead and Hercules' Legendary Journeys fame, and of course The Reliant, brings a Soviet dissident to the church, and he's like, the first thing they took away from us was the freedom to worship. We have they take away our religion, and you see a young Reagan, his eyes are aglow, being like, I'll do anything to bring Christianity back to Russia. And that sets up his lifelong career, where it's his abiding interest, other than being on camera or hanging out with a chimp, is defeating monolithic global communism.
And this is something churches still do. You know, I don't know if you guys remember during the War on Terror, they would always bring like Iraqi Christians around, and Afghani Christians, and it's just like a very classic thing that started, I believe,
they're not
around
doing that
now.
for Palestinian Christians. They're not being given a speaking tour of any religious.
They did it for Coptics with ISIS and stuff. It was, but they don't do it for Palestinians.
Danny, if you remember, a very early, and Derek, you probably remember this too. A very early TCOT thing, top conservatives on Twitter. You know, the pre-Trump
halcyon
conservative internet. Yeah, their favorite thing to do, you know, guys who had never left Missouri, was to put the Arabic symbol for Christian in their profile because of, like, you know, Al Qaeda and ISIS, and it actually this was like a Cold War thing that became like a global war on terror thing, and it actually. It's so funny, they never really examined it or thought about the reality of what Christians in the Middle East actually believe or think, or what their experiences may have been, because they literally just internalized it to think that they're just like olive-colored, like Billy Graham fans. So like Ted Cruz around this time, around like 2013 or 2014, went to like some type of like a Middle Eastern Christian Association in DC. And he was like, okay, I know exactly what to say to these guys. We will never stop defending Israel. And everyone was like, boo, fuck you. You know, because there are a lot of like Palestinian Christians and just Christians in general in the Middle East who, you know, for one reason or another, have a bone to pick with Israel, obviously. And he was like, well, fuck you. You're anti-Semitic.
But just, I mean, I think another very telling moment in this movie in terms of like how they cannot, it really just, in spite of itself, there's no way you can portray Reagan positively or negatively in which he doesn't come across as a credulous dope. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Nancy recounts a story of when the singer and teen heartthrob Pat Boone visited them at their house in Hollywood along with some fucking snake handling preacher who laid hands on Reagan and prophesied that one day he would reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And the movie's like, and Reagan believed him, and he was right to do so.
That scene I thought was actually really instructive, especially having watched The Godfather later, because every scene in The Godfather moves the plot forward. And that scene, I remember thinking about it, this does nothing, not in terms of character. Reagan already believes in himself, not in terms of plot. It was just like hitting the marks of the Reagan greatest hits in the conservative imagination thing. It was just such shitty filmmaking. It wasn't incompetent, but it was really bad filmmaking.
Yeah, if you, that scene may have been like interesting if you had no idea who Ronald Reagan was.
Right.
And then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, he became president? Like, knowing that he was a president, it's not that good. And yeah, the guy who tells him this, the snake handler, looks like a Halloween costume of Reverend Baby Billy.
Yes, he looks like Baby Billy.
So his career in Hollywood stalls out, but then he meets the love of his life, Nancy, and they get married. And then also the thing in this movie, he really loves horses too. It's a big part of this movie is his love of horses. And then like, okay, here's the thread I got to pick up on. With probably, I don't know, 15 minutes left in the movie, they introduce a character who's a Secret Service agent who rides a horse.
Yeah.
And like,
I hate
so weird.
It's like they're like,
Joe Barbaretta or something
John
from
Barbarella.
Boston PD. He has this
he's like
Boston
a horse
accent.
cop who joined the Secret Service and is the only guy in the Secret Service who knows how to ride a horse. So they're like, hey, do you want to be the president's body man? He loves to ride horses. And then that character goes away and isn't reintroduced until the last scene where he takes Reagan on his last horse ride before Alzheimer's robs him of ability to, to putter around on horseback. But yeah, it's just like, who is this character again?
That whole thing, like the handling of the Alzheimer's, which you don't get until as you said, the last scene of the movie. He's sharp as a tack the whole time. Meanwhile, we know he was like dead from the neck up from 1985 on. But it's not until the final scene where he looks in this aquarium with a little White House in it, and he's like, I know this is supposed to mean something to me, but I can't remember what it is. Like, what the fuck? And that's the first and last mention of the Alzheimer. It just carries out from there.
And like
Derek,
the movie ends with him like like the Secret Service, because like Nancy's like, I can't tell him that he can't ride a horse anymore. He loves horses so much. He loves his horseback riding. I think I don't have the heart to tell him. So they pawn it off on this Secret Service agent who's this like Boston shithead who's like, Mr. President, I can't take your horse riding no more. And then he's like, he tears up and he goes, How about one more ride? And then he's like, okay, sure, Mr. President. And the last scene of the movie is him and this guy, like Brokeback Mountain style, trotting off into the California mountains. And I just kept thinking the guy's just going to take out a gun and shoot him.
Reagan, lover of men. They could
tell me about how you tore down the Berlin Wall, Lenny. Tell me again about the Berlin Wall. And he's just like, well. Which would have been a more humane ending, honestly.
The Alzheimer's thing, it reminds me of how they cover the Iran-Contra stuff, where it's like, okay, we have these like uncomfortable aspects about this guy that we're lionizing. And like a more interesting movie, that would have kind of been like the meat of the movie. It may not have been like, they may not have spent the most time on it, but those would have been like some of the most memorable scenes and like character moments. But instead, they're just these passing like flashing scenes that almost feel dreamlike, because the director almost is like forced at gunpoint to include them. And it's like, at that point, like, don't even put them in. Reagan was doing calculus until the day he
exactly.
You know,
the way they deal with most of his presidency, because like in terms of depicting the actual like goings on of his 2 terms in the White House, most of it is dedicated to him negotiating with Gorbachev, and like the climax of the movie is him saying, "Tear down this wall." That's it. They cover the rest of his 8 years in the White House with a montage where like Nancy says something like, well, not everybody liked old Ronnie. And then it's just a montage of like gay people.
It's gay people. It's half gay people and half like mean English prog rockers. That was like the anti-Reagan coalition. It was gay people who were like, hey, we're like, you're not doing anything about this epidemic that's killed like 80,000 of us. And then like the band Yes or Roger Waters like making confusing music videos where there's a big Reagan head and he's
referred to as Ronnie Reagan.
Yeah, that the incredible anti-Reagan coalition that was half English musicians who could not vote in America. That was the biggest antagonist of the movie, more so than the Soviet Union. They're just like, they're not even a threat. He is always like 10 steps ahead of them. They are like the Keystone Cops.
And Felix, just to jump on what you said, the 2 most interesting parts of the movie, I thought, were the Iran-Contra, where it suggests that Reagan did know what was going on with Ollie North, which I thought was kind of interesting. Even the historical consensus is probably that he did have early onset Alzheimer's and that he might not have remembered what was going on. But then, do you guys remember that speechwriter?
Dana Rohrabacher, the right-wing hippie who was introduced as Nancy says this is like during the scene when he's governor of California and sends the National Guard in to crack heads at Berkeley over their anti-war protests. But she was like, some of the young people they loved Ronnie and like, you know, they had the crazy dedication to him. And then it's like, he's never name checked, but he's referred to as Dana. And I was like, is this Dana Rohrabacher? And sure enough, it was. Dana Rohrabacher met Reagan because he camped out on his lawn and was like, bro, Mrs. Reagan, I got to meet your husband. He's so rad. And then he gets a job in the White House writing speeches and then like inserts the tear down this wall line into his speech in Berlin and thus wins the Cold War for America. And I was like, did Dana Rohrabacher write this movie?
Podcasters.
This is a movie that is more than it is about the Cold War or communism or anything else. This is a movie about dick riding.
Yep.
Most of the characters are insane dick riders. And literally the last scene of the movie is actual riding, you know, bringing the motif home.
The one mention that you get of any context to Iran-Contra, I mean, it's mostly covered as like the scandal and the political effect, but the one mention that you get of the fact that we were sending weapons to fucking death squads in Central America is Ronnie going, I like these guys. They remind me of George Washington and the Continental Army. Okay. How is that?
And then Derek, then it cuts to the Bill Casey character who just nods and smiles and doesn't say anything. He's like,
looks nothing
right.
like Bill Casey. None of those fucking people look like. But what they could have done with the Rohrabacher character is that, like, there was this thing of young people associating with Reagan, like Lee Atwater, right? The Alex P. Keaton. There was this strange phenomenon, which I think really affected the politics of our young lives in the 90s and 2000s, of Reagan being associated with something cool. And that was like, that's kind of interesting. Why did this guy become associated with this forward-thinking youth culture? And again, just as a shitty movie, it didn't do anything with it. But that to me was the most interesting part. You got a glimpse of Reagan, like what was actually attractive about this guy, because that's actually a question. Why did he have the biggest blowout in American history in '84? And there's nothing in this movie that's a hagiography would help you understand why Reagan did become this very influential.
Well, he had the blowout,
towering
Danny. He had the
Danny,
blowout
it
because
just
he
sucks.
said, "I will not let my opponent's youth and inexperience be a factor in the
It's
election."
so
Like, that's the thing.
stupid. You know,
It's just
Reagan's
the
interesting.
greatest
He's
hits
actually
cover
interesting.
compilation.
That is exactly what I was going to bring up, is that, like, again, another could have been interesting moment, the blowout election, like a historical moment in American politics. But because they have to follow the conventions of, like, the shitty movies that they're ripping off, they're like, oh, this has to be like The Water Boy or something, where there's a moment where the character, where our main character, you know, it looks like he may falter. And because they're so incompetent, they make this scene, it's before the biggest blowout in electoral history, and then never really talk about the blowout at all. They're just following the most formulaic, like, sub-hero's journey bullshit.
They just show the map. I think they just show the electoral map. That's the only reference you get to
Yeah.
it being blowout. But it's
with the weird ghostly Walter Mondale, that was also a fucking weird choice that they would insert these people from their literal
debates,
TV shows. That was so weird. I've never seen that before. It's like uncanny.
I mean, it's in some way, it's just a series of vignettes, and each vignette ends with Reagan saying the magic
Doing the right
words
thing.
that and it's not even necessarily doing anything, just saying something like, the final one is this build up to his speech in Berlin, and he says, "Tear down this wall," and oh my God, and the fucking Soviet Politburo sitting there like, oh my God, he said, "Tear down the wall." What the fuck are we gonna do now? And like
he said the magic words that opened the oldest vault in country.
It was checkmate. It was checkmate in the Cold War. Yeah.
Open the oldest
what?
Sir, all the biblical figures, they're all black.
he said tear down this wall. A few people don't know this, and again, I can't believe the movie didn't do more with it. Yeah, but tear down this wall, in fact, was a secret password that opened the oldest vault in Russia, thus leading to the collapse of communism.
And that is why the young Vladimir Putin was in this movie, was because he was like, but Ronald Reagan didn't know that there are even older vaults in ancient boxes.
I feel like,
and you have
is
to
that based on anyone, Derek?
You remember the scene where like young the Vladimir Putin protege is just like, but how did we lose the motherland? And John Voight gets very, very upset, and he's like, the motherland is not communism. The motherland is Tolstoy, Turgenev, and like all these great Russian thinkers. How funny would it be if he has portraits of them on his wall? How funny would it be if it cuts to that and they're all black?
Yeah, the end of the movie, it's like a 10-minute long Scorsese like tracking shot of the Putin character going into a vault, and he opens it, and it's like, not only does he find like Tolstoy and everyone is black, but Ronald Reagan also black. And that's
you too. Every time I come here,
the new chronology.
You too. Always again.
This is a closing shot of the movie.
Except
and then there's like a memento. Then there's like a memento like scene, and he starts remembering his conversation with John Voight. And he's like, "Wait, we're both black." Everyone in the movie is black.
I don't know if you guys stuck around. I did appreciate the post-credit scene, which was, they showed Reagan's
post-credit sequence.
Well, they showed the funeral.
Yeah, dude.
Over the
9-minute
credits,
credits and a post-credit scene,
and you realize that it's actually a young Barack Obama and his gay lover watching the funeral on TV. No, I'm kidding.
No.
That reminds
like I know there. It's like is there some guy in the back of a limo and you see a head bobbing and then someone comes up and whoa. He really was a great president.
Let me be clear. Reagan is great.
I came too early. Another bunker. That reminds me a whole other angle that me and Will were talking about after we both watched this. Do you guys remember the Tip O'Neill scene? Okay, yes. Chris, do you have my favorite audio clip ever queued up? The scene where he meets Tip O'Neill it made me and Will think of a whole nother layer to this movie because when he meets Tip O'Neill, it's like, he's like,
played by Dan Lauria
hey,
of the Wonder Years.
Yeah, he's like, hey, you won the election, but come Monday, it's game time. You better be ready. And Ronald Reagan's like, well, I'll be ready. And they say some Irish bullshit to each other. And then after all of that, after like the initial flirting, Reagan's like, well, the workday ends at 6. And Tip O'Neill goes, what do you mean? And then Reagan goes, well, it means that once the workday is done, we're just a bunch of Irish guys having a beer. But I expected Reagan to say what Birdman says in my favorite clip ever.
I fuck with niggas too.
That was what was going on in that clip, and it really their relationship is so homo-thug. I'm sorry.
You'll remember Tip Trill O'Neill is the first person he sees when he wakes up in the hospital after getting shot by John Hinckley.
Yeah, he's waiting for him longer than Nancy is. He's praying with a fucking rosary holding his hand.
Right, Nancy just brings by the jar of jelly beans and then leaves, but Tip is there holding vigil this entire time.
He's like, Tip, sometimes I thought I said no bitches in the room. But sometimes, Tip, I want to know, where are the thugs? Sometimes I want to talk to the thugs.
Gorbachev is lucky it wasn't in California. A boss call would have been made.
Can I mention like a couple of random things that we haven't touched on, which are in no particular order, but the blink and you'll miss it appearance of Scott Stapp as Frank Sinatra. You don't even know that he's Frank Sinatra.
No, yeah, there's no indication given
which
that he's
is incredible.
Frank Sinatra. He doesn't look anything like Frank Sinatra and is on screen for all of 4 seconds.
The Robert Davi as Leonid Brezhnev, which is immaculate.
So good. Great performance.
That was great. I gotta say, like, credit where it's due. This movie was putrid, but there was one scene in this movie that got a genuine chuckle out of me. And that's the scene where, like, they're talking about how Reagan had a hard time negotiating with the Soviet Union because after Brezhnev, like, every one of their leaders dropped dead in like a couple because they were all a billion years old, smoked 80 cigarettes a day, and were on like every pill known to man. But there's a funny montage of like after Brezhnev, it's like Andropov, the other one, and like it's just that it's one state funeral after another, and he was like, I can't even get them on the phone; they keep dying.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah,
20 years younger than Biden, by the way, when they all died.
Yes,
That's incredible.
Exactly right.
Robert Davi as Brezhnev shocked me because he looked like if the real Brezhnev had Chad surgery.
He did. He had that narrow face. It's so funny.
Yeah, it really like Brezhnev had like one of those balloon faces you get when you start drinking at 7 years old, like all of those guys did.
Yeah. But the last thing was the performances, and this they show up around the time when he starts meeting with Gorbachev. The performances of Margaret Thatcher and
the Margaret Thatcher character was so weird.
The Japanese prime minister.
She wanted to slap him off more than Nancy did.
Well, so yeah. I love these because the guy who plays the Japanese prime minister, Yasuhiro Nakasone, I think it's after their first summit, gives the most Principal Skinner with the laser to his head, like line reading on the phone, where he's like, Mr. President, we all stand with you. The free world is in your corner and you are speaking for all of us. But then you go to Thatcher and she's like, go get him, Ronnie. Like, what the what, do you really imagine that these people spoke like this? Like, what the fuck? It's incredible.
I can't wait
stuff.
to jump on your pony, Reagan. Cowboy, go, cowboy, go.
Yeah, Thatcher was kind of hot.
I'm
I thought.
tired, lady.
Ronnie, you can do me from behind and pretend I'm your friend. I know you fuck with Democrats too. Is that what you said?
You can call me Rock. I mean, obviously, like Dennis Quaid is passable as Ronald Reagan. I mean, it's like nobody in this movie is really trying. And there's something about Dennis Quaid's plastic surgery and the makeup that they used to make him look slightly more Reagan-esque that made him look frightening the entire movie.
Well, especially when they de-aged him, he's got like the ears and nose of an old guy, and he moves like an old man. So there's this whole uncanny quality to the first hour and a half of the movie. He just looks so strange.
Like, as you might expect from a movie like this, virtually all of the performances are let in, phoned in, or just simply not trying. I will carve out one exception. Two exceptions. I thought the two people in the movie that actually seemed like they were acting or like even maybe like happy to be there was Dan Lauria, who plays Tip O'Neill with like red-faced Irish brio. You could smell the liquor on him in that performance, and I thought that was credible and authentic. And then weirdly, Xander Berkeley as George Schultz, turned in kind of a pretty good performance, actually. Yeah. But other than that, it's just really it's quite dire. It's very, very. This movie was woo.
They really, I mean, when they're not doing like time traveling people sent back to kill Jesus, they struggle. The conservative film space struggles, I think, to put together a good movie.
I wish the Assassin's 33 AD people made this movie. It would have been way more interesting. They would have they would have asked way more interesting questions. But yeah, it's sort of the nadir of Christian filmmaking, as we call it. We've seen enough of these to know when something's uninspired and like is literally just being made for like who's that guy? Harlan Crow. So Harlan Crow can have a tax write-off. And this is one of those.
And I was just trying to think, like, who is this movie supposed to appeal to? And the answer is that this is just this is just pure boomer slop. This is just treacly nostalgia that with the same production values and general quality of like actually sub History Channel documentary quality to it. Like, if you didn't to a new generation, if you didn't know who Ronald Reagan is, like, what would be the appeal of this movie at all, other than like, hey, I know you think you're sports stars and Taylor Swift is pretty cool, but what if I told you about someone who was even cooler? His name was Ronald Reagan, and he was president of America.
Well, that's the thing, is that like most of the audience for this movie, I would say 70% of the intended audience for this movie died in the first year of COVID. I'm not even kidding. Like, that really is it.
So before we go, I do have one question. Why do you think they chose that framing device? It's really so weird. It'd just be much easier to tell the cradle to grave Reagan
I'll tell you
story.
exactly. I'll tell you exactly why. No, I think it's because it is an obvious crutch that the screenwriters had because look, making biopics is very hard, especially about very well-known people like that. And you can go the route that covers most of their entire life and political career, a la, very successfully, I might add, in Oliver Stone's Nixon, which I think is a great film that is very interesting and thrilling, and just like you learn a lot about the subject, and it reveals something about both the filmmaker as an artist, but also like his subject matter. Or you can go also very successfully to portray a pivotal moment of just like 2 weeks in the life of his political career, a la Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. They chose to go the full life story route. But the problem is that there's so much you have to include that it's very hard to just like move from one scene to another in any kind of organic way, or just like I said, to show rather than tell. The John Voight KGB framing device was just a way that they could write this movie like a Wikipedia entry about their favorite president. And it's the style of writing of a kid trying to relate a TV show that you've never seen to you, where they just go, and then, and then, and then. And the John Voight character essentially is a stand-in for the screenwriters to go, and then. as the narrator of the movie, who just gives you the information necessary so they can get on to another scene of another wonderful
Right, as opposed to but or therefore, which has causal connection between scenes. Yeah, it's just a list of Wikipedia entry. Yeah, that's smart. I agree.
Are there any other performances? I mean, like, are there any other performances or standout moments from this movie that I'm neglecting? Because I mean, like, the movie felt about 9 hours long. I know I'm abridging quite a lot of it for a good reason, but
God, it was just terrible.
No, it was fucking horrible. It was really bad.
And I have appreciated Dennis Quaid going on the right-wing media circuit. I mean, apparently he's right-wing now. He was on Tucker, and he's talking about the wokes and stuff. It's like, are these his actual beliefs, or is he just trying to get cast in a movie? Like, I don't know. Dennis Quaid is like a pretty good actor. Dennis Quaid's a good actor. I like Dennis Quaid, but
there was surprisingly little culture war stuff, actually. That now that I think about it, there was almost no culture war stuff except the gays hate Reagan scene, basically.
I mean, they leaned heavily on his religiosity, and I think for like a Christian audience, these were the kind of dog whistles to be like, aha, you know, like when George W. Bush would make reference to the Battle of Armageddon, or what is it, Gog and Magog, or whatever, and it was just like to any normal person just slides over their brain. But if you've had one drenched in evangelical mythology for 30 years, you're like, oh yeah, he's one of us. I mean, I wish I had some closing thoughts on this movie, but
my closing thought was that last horse ride. I was praying for the horse to come out and kick me in the head and end it. And I mean, the end was in sight, like the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. But I was like, I can't take this anymore. Just kill me.
Not even hilariously bad. Just boring.
Bad.
Just really dreadful. That had opportunities to be more insane. But it was like having an older relative talk to you. That's what this movie felt like. And it recreated that experience beautifully. And I guess in summation, I think in a lot of ways, it actually is the perfect biopic for Ronald Reagan, because he remains essentially unknowable, unlikable, and the movie's quite bad. So I think it is actually a perfect reflection of his life and career as an actor and politician.
Yeah, that seems like a good place to end it, really.
Yeah.
Derek and Danny, I want to thank you so much for joining us. The show is American Prestige. Always good to have you on the show. And you have an American Prestige related announcement you'd like to share with our audience?
All right, so we've been on Substack for a while. We're switching platforms to supporting cast. So if anyone's an American Prestige subscriber, please keep your eyes out for an email about how to very easily switch your subscription in one click. And thank you guys again for having us on. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening to American Prestige as we move. So thanks, Will. Thanks for giving us that chance.
Well, thanks again for everyone for listening to Chapo. And I hope you'll tune in again when Bao, An Artist at War, comes out. That is a movie I will be seeing day one, opening night in theaters.
I mean, you got to do one for Lincoln Lover of Men too, right? I mean, there's got to be.
No, that's for his private collection.
Movie, the Reagan the Reagan movie theater experience has thankfully programmed this show for the next couple months. So we got some fire. We got some real nice things being chefed up right now in Chapo Laboratories.
I am so excited for the Walt Disney of Israel. You have no idea.
All right, gang. Till next time, we'll see you at the movies and in American history, where we all have to live until we die. But hopefully America will end before then. But all right, till next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.